What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 30 preview where I'm going to go through a bunch of your questions and give you my opinion and hopefully help you along the way. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Let's get into it. All right, let's start with a question on chips. So what should we do if we have all chips left? And I'm going to assume this includes triple captaincy as well. Quick reminder of the double game week schedule. So we've got 7 teams confirmed doubling in game week 34. Most of the other postponed fixtures will go into game week 37. So we're likely to have another 6 teams that double then. And there's one fixture left over, which will probably be Spurs versus Chelsea. And that's most likely to go into game week 36. So in 36, we might just have 2 teams doubling, and that's Spurs and Chelsea. And both of those teams would also double in game week 37 as well. So for most people that have got all chips left, they're probably going to use the free hit and bench boost in game weeks 34 and 37. You can go with a different strategy that fits your team, your preferences on FPL players and stuff like that, but the majority of people will use those 2 chips in those 2 game weeks. Which way round you do it, completely up to you. I personally think that free hit 34, bench boost 37 is better than the other way around, and that is down to Spurs and Chelsea players because Spurs blank in game week 34 and Chelsea have Arsenal away. So getting to free hit them out and then keeping those players that have good fixtures now for their 2 double game weeks afterwards, I think works better. You are more than welcome to do it the other way around if that's what you prefer. That leaves triple captain. If you want to use it on a double game week player, it would then have to be used in game week 36, right? Over on someone like Son or Palmer, because you're using other chips in 34 and 37. Is Salah in game week 34 a better triple captain in isolation than Son or Palmer in 36? Yes, I would say that he is. But when you're thinking about chip combinations, I think it's better to use the free hit or bench boost in 34 instead and just use the triple captain in that game week 36 double. With the wild card, that really comes down to how your team is looking right now. If you think you need a wild card, either use it in game week 30 or 31, then you get to free hit in 34 for 11 double game week players, and then you would bench boost in game week 37. That's what a lot of people are going to do. You can call that the template strategy, the safe strategy, whatever you want to name it. That's what a lot of people are going to do. Wildcard 30 or 31, free hit 34, triple captain 36, and bench boost 37. And that looks like a pretty good strategy. The main downside that I can see is you're wildcarding now and not bench boosting until game week 37. That's quite a gap. Stuff could happen. You might have to take hits and stuff to fix your bench, etc. But I guess whichever strategy you go with, there's always going to be some kind of downside. So ultimately, if you need a wildcard now because you've dead-ended into game week 29, then go ahead and use it. There's no issues with it. The only other combination I would consider is saving the wildcard until later if your team looks okay now. So you could instead free hit in 34, so you've got 11 double game week players, and then wildcard in 35, so you're much closer to the bench boost. But not only that, a lot of teams that you would want to double or triple up on, or the majority of people would want to double or triple up on in game week 37, also have good fixtures in 35 and 36, and in a lot of cases, 38 as well. So by that strategy, you're making a lot fewer decisions on your bench boost and the players you're selecting in general for game week 37 by being able to wildcard in game week 35 instead. But that really just depends on how your team looks right now. So I would basically do maybe a similar exercise to this. So this is the wildcard draft I put together the other day. You might have different preferences. That's absolutely fine. Put your own preferred wildcard draft together and then see how it stacks up over the next few weeks versus your own team now without a wildcard plus a few free transfers. If you think you can manage game weeks 30 to 33 without any issues, then free hit 34, wildcard 35, I think looks really nice. Some people will be in a position where their team just looks awful and it makes sense to wildcard. That's absolutely fine. But other people might not. They might not have gone all in on game week 29. They might have Chelsea players, Arsenal players, maybe an easy way to get Salah in right now, and they might not need that wildcard, right? So this is what I would do. This is the wildcard that I came up with, and this is my team on Fantasy Football Hub. As always, if you want to check all this stuff for yourself, links in the description below. But if we look at the main differences between my team and the wildcard team, up front, I still went for Haaland, but I had Isak and Darwin on wildcard. For my actual team, I've got Watkins and Solanke. Now, long term, right? Darwin's got a double in 34. Isak's got a double probably in 37. But that doesn't matter right now, right? They don't have a double game week at this point. They've got a single game week. And I don't think Watkins and Solanke is awful compared to Isak and Darwin. In some ways, I actually think Watkins and Solanke might be slightly better, right? And you don't have to worry about Darwin straight away because you're going to free hit in game week 34 anyway on this strategy that I'm talking about. Defense is a slightly different story. My wildcard had Petrovic, Udogi, Lascelles, and Gusto. So Burnley at home, Luton at home, West Ham at home, and then obviously the double up on Chelsea, so Burnley at home again. My defence does look a little bit worse. I've got a double up on Bournemouth, Everton at home. Not necessarily great, not necessarily awful. Bradley against Brighton at home. I'm assuming Trent's still going to be out, so I actually don't mind playing him. And then Gabriel against Man City away. So that doesn't look quite so good, but is that enough to wildcard? I would say probably not. And maybe my team's a bad example because I free hit in 29, but obviously you can run through this for your own team. And then in midfield, I've got Son, Palmer, Foden, and Fernandes. Now, the key player I'm missing there is Salah. So my defence plus Salah, that might be enough to wildcard, but I can get Salah next week for a -4, and then suddenly I'm looking a little bit better. So if I go to game week 31, if Trent's not back, which he may well be, right? But let's just assume he's not, then, sorry, let me just, I'm clicking the wrong button here. Why won't it let me, substitute for Saliba, there you go. Helps if you click the right buttons when you do these things. For game week 31, like my defence is Neto against Palace at home, and I've got double Arsenal against Luton at home, and Bradley against Sheffield United at home. And even if Bradley doesn't play, I can just play Zabani against Palace at home. So my team doesn't look too bad defensively in game week 31. Up front, I've got Haaland against Villa at home, Solanke against Palace at home, and Watkins against Man City away. Now, Watkins is not great at that point, but I can take him out for a cheap defender, a cheap forward instead, bench them, and just sell Fernandes to Salah. And all of a sudden, I've got Son, Palmer, Foden, Saka, and Salah as my 5-man midfield. And that's perfectly fine, right? If your team's in a similar position where you can get through the next 4 weeks, so 30 to 33, and your team looks almost as good as a wild card, it might be better to slightly switch your strategy and wild card later. Because, like I said, a lot of those teams doubling in game week 37 also have good fixtures between 35 and 38 in general. So it's just something to think about. I think they're the main two strategies now left for people, right? Without going into every other possible combination you could go for. You wildcard now, or 31, you free hit 34, you bench boost 37, or you dead end into game week 33, you free hit 34. You don't have to worry about any double game week plays until just before the 34 deadline. You can pick and choose whoever you want, and then you wildcard in 35 much closer to your bench boost. So I'll go through an exercise like that, see how much you like your team. If you love it, great, keep it. If not, start to wildcard soon. All right, let's talk about balance. So what is the perfect balance for people wildcarding now without a free hit? And how many players should we be looking at for game week 34 whilst thinking ahead to game week 37? And by the way, I think part of this answer is also going to apply to people without chips whatsoever, because essentially it's who are your priority transfers in. And I think the obvious answer is Liverpool and Arsenal. Liverpool have got good fixtures from game week 30 right up until the double in 34, and Arsenal have got good fixtures from 31 right up until their double in game week 34. And if you got stuck with players from either of those teams afterwards, it really wouldn't be a huge issue either. So they are the two main teams I would be looking at. If you're on wildcard, then a triple up on Liverpool looks pretty obvious, I would say. Darwin, Salah and Van Dijk for a lot of people. You could look at Luis Diaz as well. Obviously, if you make transfers later on, you could potentially look to get Trent in if he's fit. But a triple up there looks pretty obvious. And then for Arsenal, a triple up looks good as well. Do you need to put triple Arsenal on wildcard 30? Not necessarily, but I would definitely have transfers ready to get to 3 by the time you get to game week 34. So that already gives you 6 double game week players, and that should be your priority transfers if you're not wildcarding as well, just if you're using free transfers. And then even if you've got like 1 or 2 more players from that, like 7 to 8 is probably enough. On wildcard, it's a little bit easier because you can have 1 double game week goalkeeper that's not from Liverpool or Arsenal, and then on your bench, you have a double game week goalkeeper for game week 37, just so you're partially ready for that as well. If I was wildcard, I'd have Solanke instead of Isak. If I had no free hit, that is, because obviously Solanke's got good fixtures before 34 plus the double in 34 itself, and then you can transfer him to Isak later on. So if you've got triple Liverpool, triple Arsenal, Solanke and a goalkeeper, 8 players, that's probably already pretty good. Because the thing about game week 37 is Man United will double that week, and they've got Sheffield United at home in game week 34. So as an enabler, if you didn't want to go for Sarabia, for example, because you don't really want him long term, you could go for Garnacho, play him in 34 against Sheffield United, and then he's ready for game week 37 later on. Hopefully you didn't hear me just hit my bottle there. So I think that's what I'd be looking at. 7 to 8 players. If you've got a preference for more double game week players in 34 rather than 37, obviously you can have more. But I think triple Arsenal, triple Liverpool is a good starting point. You just add a couple more from there, and that's probably a pretty good balance. Then you're looking at, Man United and Newcastle players, etc., that will double later on. And in particular, right now, Newcastle have got some good fixtures too. So another chip question. I've only got my free hit left, and I'm genuinely thinking of leaving it until game week 38. What are your thoughts? So initial thoughts would be that chip will be much better used in a double game week over 34 or 37, because any team that doubles in 34 won't also double in game week 37. So ideally, where you can, and chips are good for this, you want 2 different teams. And in fact, the free hit is perfect for that, right? You either load up on double game week 34 players and free hit in 37, or you do it the other way around. Which way is best will probably depend on how your team looks like right now, how many double game week 34 players you have. But that is probably going to net you more points than just free hitting in game week 38. I do get the theory behind the potential upside in game week 38, because by that point, you know exactly which team still has something to play for, who's still in Europe, who's in the FA Cup final. Because all teams kick off at the same time, we'll probably get a bit more team news than we would any other game week. I think sometimes people expect us to have the full team sheets for all 20 teams. That doesn't happen, but we will have more team news, so you can react to that. And that all sounds great, but you're not buying any extra fixtures. When you free hit in a double or even a blank game week, you're getting additional fixtures without having to take, a huge amount of hits and stuff like that. Obviously, if stuff falls really well for you, you might be able to do it without hits anyway, right? But that's the general idea. In game week 38, there would have to be like a disaster for most other people's teams to then having to be playing with like 6 or 7 players, right? Most people are going to have 11 players, even if they're not quite as good as yours on a free hit. So, for example, I might have Bruno Fernandes left over from the double game week in 37, and Man United have got Brighton away in game week 38. Yeah, on a free hit, maybe you go for Saka against Everton at home instead. I'd rather have Saka than Fernandes. But the difference between those 2 players on the final day is probably not enough to warrant a free hit. And I think you'd need so many of those small things to add up to make it worth it. I just don't think that's the likely thing to happen, right? Because either, if you look at the fixtures on the last day, either you're carrying Arsenal and Liverpool players through and free hitting in 37, in which case you've got the good players for the last day, or you're free hitting in 34 and you're carrying teams like Chelsea, Spurs, Man United, and Newcastle. And on the last day of the season, Newcastle got Brentford away, Man United got Brighton away, Chelsea got Bournemouth at home, and Spurs got Sheffield United away. So it's not even that bad. Would I rather have triple Liverpool, triple Arsenal than triple Man United, triple Newcastle? Yes, absolutely. But I'm not gaining any fixtures. So you're really hoping that those 2 teams absolutely smash it and Newcastle and Man United do terribly. Either way, my general point I guess I'm trying to make is I think using it in a double is just so much better. I don't think there's any argument otherwise. If you've got all your chips left and your team looks great right now, you've already got loads of Arsenal, loads of Liverpool, you can just dead end into game week 34. You don't need the free hit or any chips that week. Maybe you even want a triple captain. Great. Then you wildcard 35, bench boost 37. You need to find a different week for the free hit. In that case, maybe 38 could be really good, because I'm going to be personally left over with all those players I just spoke about, Spurs, Man United, Newcastle. You can go and get Arsenal or Liverpool instead. That could be nice, but you need all those other chips. For someone that's only got their free hit, I just don't see why you wouldn't use it in a double. So if you had to sell one of Saka, Watkins or Haaland to accommodate Salah, who would it be? And I think for me, the answer is pretty clearly Watkins. I don't really have any hesitation around that. You've got City and Arsenal away next 4 game weeks. No double game weeks to come for the rest of the season. He's taken up a forward spot where you've only got 3 as well. I think it would be him. And I'm not saying it's easy, right? He's been the best player in the game so far this season in terms of overall points. But if I only had to keep 2 of them, then Watkins is easily the one that I would drop. I think in terms of starts, they're all good. You could put a question mark over Haaland's minutes in particular around European matches, but I don't think he gets benched. Haaland and Saka are on penalties as well. I just don't think there's a great case to be made to keep Watkins, despite the fact he's got the most points overall in FPL. And look, there's always an edge case where someone's specific team, it makes more sense to sell one of the other two instead. But I don't think that's the case for the majority of people. I was actually a little bit surprised on yesterday's video how many people left a comment to say that they would drop Haaland before Watkins. I think that's crazy, honestly. I know that Haaland is expensive, but if you can fit in all the other transfers you want to make while still keeping Haaland, then he is the one to keep over Watkins. He's expensive for sure, and at that price, you do want to captain him. But I think in Game Week 33 alone against Luton at home, even with the Real Madrid matches either side, I think he starts, right? And I think he only needs 60, 70 minutes to get enough points to warrant captaincy. Some people are probably thinking about selling Son soon because they're getting ready for the double in 34. Spurs blank that week. And so in Game Week 32 against Palace away, there's maybe the opportunity to captain Haaland there as well. I mean, you could go for Salah against Man United away instead. If you've got Son, then he's got Forest at home. But Haaland's going to be an option. Maybe not so much in 31 because Salah's got Sheffield United at home. But even beyond that, right? Game week 35, Forest away for Haaland. Game week 37, he's going to have a double game week of Fulham away, Spurs away. You're going to want him longer term anyway. And even in the short term, like, he's better than Watkins. And with Saka, he's got the double in 34. So I think it's clearly Watkins. Yes, there'll be some people's teams where that doesn't make sense. But I think they're in the minority rather than the majority. So who is better to cover Newcastle's fixtures, Isak or Gordon? For me, it would be Isak. I think he's Newcastle's main goal threat, penalty taker as well. There is a case to be made for Gordon, absolutely. He's a bit cheaper. And I think there's question marks over Isak's ability to stay fit. We don't really have that with Gordon. He always seems to be available. But I think right now, if I was picking one for my team, it would be Isak. Your team might be set up slightly differently. Your chip strategy might play a part in this as well. For example, if you're wildcarding in Game Week 30 and free hitting in 34, and you're looking longer term, maybe you have got space for Gordon in your midfield. But if I look at my team, for example, I've got Saka, Foden, Palmer, Fernandes, and Son. If I switch Fernandes to Salah, who is obviously a player a lot of people are trying to get in at the moment, and I downgrade Watkins, like, I just don't want to switch any of these midfielders for Anthony Gordon right now. Whereas down the line, I would be happy to switch Solanke to Isak after that double in Game Week 34. And if I think I'll get my words out, I think if I was setting up a wild card now with a free hit in 34, thinking which Newcastle player would I want long term, I think it has to be Isak, because while Wilson is out, he's absolutely nailed. He's going to start every game he's fit and available for, and obviously he would be on penalties as well. So it's not a case that I dislike Anthony Gordon as a pick, because I definitely don't. I had him on my team for quite a while. I think he's actually a good midfielder pick, right? Your preferences on which players to own right now might be a bit different. I think if I was only picking one, it would be Isak. So Chelsea can see quite a few goals. Instead of a defensive double up, what do you think about Nicolas Jackson on wildcard? Now, I actually quite like him as a pick, and he's someone that I'm considering for wildcard 35, especially if Chelsea have a double in 36 and 37, because his minutes have been pretty good. I know at times he can be frustrating to watch, I get that, but I think for his price and the fixtures they've got later on, I quite like him. Would I put him on a wild card now, even if I was free hitting in 34? I'm not sure I would, and that's mostly down to the yellow card situation. So he's already on 9 yellow cards. One more, and he gets a 2-game suspension. Now, he hasn't had a huge amount recently. Since game week, 19, he's only got 1, but he's only played in 6 starts in that game. In that time. He's had 1 yellow card. Now, that's not bad considering what he was like the rest of the season, but it only takes 1 slight mistake, 1 foul the ref doesn't like, and he's then suspended for 2 games. Now, if you're building a wild card where you've got 8 really good attackers and you're going to free hit in 34 and losing Jackson for 2 games doesn't make a huge amount of difference, maybe you could risk it, but I'm just not sure I'd put someone into my team with a transfer or a wild card, or I could then lose them for 2 games. Like, imagine if he gets a yellow card against Burnley at home this week. You then lose him for Man United at home and Sheffield United away. Or he gets the yellow against Man United, and then you lose him for Sheffield United and Everton. It's just not an ideal situation. And I was just double-checking here. Chelsea have only played 27 games. And the increase to 15 yellow cards isn't until your team has played 32 games. So he's got to get through another 5 matches without getting 1 yellow card. That just seems really unlikely. That is why I prefer him later on, because when we get to wildcard 35, anyone that wants Jackson will be hoping he's already served that suspension so they can put him into their team. If he hasn't, well, actually, by that point, it won't matter, right? Because either he'll have the suspension or it'll have gone up to 15 yellows, right? So you can make the decision then. But that's ultimately the point. You're making that decision a lot later. If you get him in now and then you lose him, I just don't think that's really ideal. So in theory, I like the double up on attack versus defence because I think there's question marks over Gusto and Petrovic's long-term minutes anyway. But I just don't think I'd put Jackson on with 9 yellows. So last question, if you could only bring in one this week, would you go for Son or Salah? I have wildcard and bench boost left. I think the answer is Salah. I can't really see any reason in isolation why you would go for Son instead. Obviously, Salah is more money. Maybe that blocks you from making other moves. Maybe it means more hits down the line. You'd have to consider that for your own team. But in isolation, you absolutely take Salah. You could argue that maybe Son is slightly better this week for Luton at home, but I don't think there's much in it. And then after game week 30, you definitely want Salah for game week 31 against Sheffield United at home. And then they've got the guaranteed double in 34 as well, whereas Son will blank. So I just can't see any reason to buy Son over Salah because if you've got your wild card left, like even if you use it in 31, I still think I would just go for Salah because what if something happens where you don't want to use your wild card? You still want Salah for Sheffield United at home, right? And if you save it until 35, you can just get Son then. So yeah, I've seen a few people looking at this. I think Son's great this week. I'm happy to own him. I'm probably going to captain him and not get Salah, but that just works differently for my team. If I was selecting from scratch or wildcarding this week, Salah all the way for me. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Rate 5 stars as well if you're listening on podcast. Otherwise, I'll catch you tomorrow for team selection. Then we'll have final thoughts on Friday.